Hey everyone, welcome to Rice Public Radio. It's a nice and relaxing Sunday afternoon. I've got a cup of coffee next to me and a Bernie Sanders mug. So let's get started. A common media talking point about Bernie Sanders is his electability and how he won't resonate with middle America or why he won't win in a general election. I'm going to talk about several articles and charts that just shows how popular Bernie Sanders is in terms of grassroots support and his appeal to ordinary Americans. So firstly, let's talk about an article by Forbes that lists the number of billionaires who have donated directly to the candidate's campaign. So let's go off from the top of the list. Pete Buttigieg, 23 billionaires have donated to his campaign. Cory Booker, 18. Kamala Harris, 17. Michael Bennet, 15. Joe Biden, 13. John Hickenlooper, 11. Beto O'Rourke, 9. Amy Klobuchar, 8. And we have Bernie Sanders at 0. Now, why do you think billionaires support Pete Buttigieg? Could it be that Pete will be doing favors for them? One doesn't give money to a candidate without favors. Let's take a look at a fairly recent article by Mediaite. And it reads, quote, "You raised quite a bit of money, almost $25 million in a quarter, which was phenomenal," Axelrod said. "You've done 70 fundraisers in places like Hollywood, Silicon Valley, Wall Street. Does it give you any concern? We are trying to reach everybody at every level. In addition to the traditional political work, we do have a lot of grassroots fundraisers where tickets are very affordable," Buttigieg said. "Until we change our campaign finance system, we're going to continue to have this problem that the people we elect and expect to spend their time solving our policy problems are spending way too much time raising the dollars they need in order to play the field," Buttigieg explained. "Including you?" Axelrod asked. "Yeah, how else can we fund the campaigns?" Buttigieg responded. Axelrod noted, You're playing the rules. They are written now, and try and change them if you get the chance." "I can't change them until we get the chance," Buttigieg said. Silly Pete. I hate how he says, "How else can we fund the campaigns?" Bernie Sanders has millions of cash on hand and leads the Democratic primary race with money raised, donors, volunteers, all without a super PAC or billionaire donors or support, as we heard in the above statistic. Guess why Bernie is doing so well without billionaire donors? It's really simple. His message resonates across ordinary working class voters. So Pete, maybe it's on you to have policies that are supported by the American people. Then maybe small dollar donors will support you. Bernie Sanders proved in 2016 that it was possible to run a campaign, a very successful campaign that won 23 states in the primary with small dollar donations, no corporate super PACs, and so on. Obviously, we need campaign finance reform. I'm not saying, hey, just run your campaign on smaller dollar donations and that's that. We have to reform campaign finance. Currently, money equals speech in American politics. This means that whoever gives the most money usually has the loudest voice at the table. Billionaires are able to donate unlimited amounts of money to super PACs that can help coordinate and support candidates. This is essentially corruption, bribery, and how rich, wealthy folks influence a campaign. Surprise, surprise. Let's look at President Barack Obama. He took the most money from Wall Street during his election, and look what happened. He bailed out the banks. Not a single Wall Street financier was sent to jail. In fact, a Citigroup executive even sent him a list of preferred candidates for candidate positions, which ended up being remarkably accurate. Obama took all that Wall Street cash. Look what he did. Look what he did to Wall Street when the financial disaster hit. He didn't do anything to address those issues. He just gave him all that money to bail them out, and that's it. Back to Pete Buttigieg. He probably can't even get regular Joes to support him because he's against Medicare for all, college for all, against the incarcerated voting. He's posing as an enlightened centrist. It's absolutely disgusting. When you have 23 billionaires that donated to your campaign, you have to be really skeptical about that. People always want a return on their investment. People don't just give you money for free without expecting anything in return. So Bernie Sanders, on the other hand, is a man of the American working class, a champion of the average Joe. So we all know that taking money from wealthy donors and then supporting them with beneficial legislation is corruption. Let's take a look into it a little bit more closely. Working class people have massively different interests than wealthy donors. Working class folk want to improve their material conditions, like improving healthcare, raising wages. They want job security, college affordability for themselves and their kids. They want to tackle climate change. Now, what do billionaires and wealthy Wall Street bankers want? They want tax cuts, deregulation so they can continue to pollute the environment, so they can dodge laws and utilize loopholes to stash their cash offshore, so they can ship jobs overseas, so they can benefit off our endless wars. What for? All in the name of profit. These are all interests that negatively impact the working class. The ruling class has zero concern for the environment or ordinary Americans. They'll do anything to rip off the common American worker just for the sake of profit. Profit above human beings. Okay, anyways, back on topic. The New York Times recently created a map that displays the amount of donors for each presidential candidate. Obviously, you won't be able to see it on this podcast because you're listening to it, but I have included a link in the description for you to look at the chart yourself. There are multiple candidates listed: Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Beto O'Rourke. Each candidate is represented by a color. The more shaded the map, the more concentrated the amount of individual donors are in that area. Bernie Sanders has by far the most individual donors. Bernie's color essentially covers the entire United States. Now let's look at the number of individual donors per candidate. Bernie Sanders, 746,000. Elizabeth Warren, 421,000. Buttigieg, 390,000. Harris, 277,000. Biden, 256,000. Beto O'Rourke, 188,000. This is absolutely remarkable. Actually, for those who have already followed Bernie Sanders since 2015, it's not that surprising. But if you're new to his campaign or you're thinking about voting for him, this is excellent proof about the reach of his message. Bernie has nearly twice the number of individual donors as Elizabeth Warren. In fact, the New York Times had to create a second chart without Bernie Sanders in it because of his colossal lead over the rest of the field. It's absolutely hilarious. Now, here's the real big shocker. Now, the infographic takes information from the FEC and ActBlue, the donation processing site for presidential candidates. Now, it takes this information, but it excludes information regarding donations $200 or less. So this chart by the New York Times only contains information about individuals who've donated $201 or more. And Bernie Sanders is already crushing it. So think about it. We know that Bernie Sanders kills it in small dollar donations. If they had that information on hand and included in the chart, I bet Bernie Sanders would be completely wiping the floor more so than he already is with these candidates in terms of donations. We're actually going to talk about the $200 or less donations a little bit later. These charts just show that Bernie's message can reach ordinary Americans. His color is painted on the chart from coast to coast. Unlike candidates like Beto O'Rourke or Amy Klobuchar or Joe Biden, who only have isolated donor support in their home regions, Bernie has individual donors from across the nation. According to the chart, and hopefully I'm interpreting it correctly, his highest concentration of donors from the West Coast, the Midwest, Appalachia, and the Rust Belt. This is great news because the media loves to paint Bernie Sanders as he's unelectable, too far left for Americans to digest, and this entire chart just debunks that myth. These states in the Midwest and the Rust Belt and Appalachia, they're typically portrayed as conservative states or purple states, red states, whatever. If many of his donors are coming from those areas, that's an excellent sign for the Bernie Sanders campaign. Speaking on contributions, there's a chart I found on Reddit from the Sanders for President subreddit. So apparently this chart is pulled from FEC information, so I believe it's accurate. It's a 2020 donation distribution broken down by candidate and monetary amount. Now, this chart shows how much money a candidate has that comes from donations in a certain donor bracket. It's split into $200 and under, $201 to $499, $500 to $999, $1,000 to $1,999, and $2,000 and above. So the maximum is $2,800. I think that's the cap on individual contributions to a campaign. But you can see that it's split into various brackets. Now, according to this chart, Donald Trump has a whopping $39.8 million coming from $200 or under donations. He has $12.9 million coming from donations $2,000 or more. I just wanted to point that out to see how much, money Donald Trump has in hand. So obviously he does have grassroots support on the right wing, but he does have a lot of, rich, wealthy donors donating into his campaign as well. So, but now here's the interesting point. We're going to take a look at those Democratic candidates. Let's look at Bernie Sanders. He has $32 million coming from donations $200 or under. This number drops way down to $1 million from $200 donations to $499, and only $634,000 from donations coming from donations $2,000 and more. Pete Buttigieg has $17 million coming from $200 and under, and interestingly enough, $3 million from $1,000 to $1,999, and a whopping $6.8 million from donations $2,000 and above. Kamala Harris has $11 million from $200 and below, and $6.9 million from $2,000 and above. Joe Biden has $8.8 million from $200 and under, and $9 million coming from donations $2,000 and higher. It's really surprising to see that Bernie Sanders is the only candidate whose donor amounts trend downwards as you ascend that donor bracket. I theorize that it is because his message appeals to common, ordinary men and women and not wealthy donors. Obviously, Bernie Sanders talked about taxing the rich, ending those loopholes, taxing Wall Street, ending the exploitation by the drug and pharmaceutical companies. It's obviously his campaign message has a lot to do with that. Now, he has enormous amounts of money raised from small dollar donations. It's inspiring, really. People are just giving whatever they can. Now, let's look at establishment hacks like Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden. They don't have that much money coming from $200 or under donors. I mean, Pete Buttigieg has $17 million, which is pretty good. But every time you ascend that donor bracket, their haul of cash goes up. These candidates aren't going to rock the boat too much. That's why the wealthy and rich are supporting them and giving them a boost at the upper end of that donor bracket. It's disgusting. Joe Biden has, if you compare the two brackets, he has $200 and under and $2,000 plus and above. He pretty much has the same amount of money. $8.8 million coming from $200 and under, and $9 million coming from $2,000 and above. So doesn't seem like he has that much grassroots support, and a lot of money are just coming from people who can afford to fork out $2,000 plus. So you really have to. It makes you wonder. It doesn't make you wonder. Joe Biden he doesn't care about changing it up. He's saying we shouldn't blame the rich. I'm not going to fundamentally change your way of life. That's probably why all those rich donors are coming out in support of him. Hopefully you can see that Bernie Sanders is very electable. He has immense grassroots support, a ton of money hauled in from small dollar donations and not from billionaires. Like we touched upon earlier, zero billionaires donated to Bernie's campaign. He's not like a Pete Buttigieg, a Kamala Harris, or a Joe Biden, candidates that will talk like they care about the ordinary American working class voter and then take money from billionaires and special interests. So again, we can see that Bernie Sanders is consistent. He has a working class agenda, and he's the best candidate for 2020.